Good afternoon, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with an early look at the Week 4 waiver wire. Full disclosure, we're recording this Monday morning, September 25th, before the two Monday night games. So obviously things can change, injuries, players could step up, whatever it is, between now and when you're watching this on Tuesday morning. But that's again why we call it the early waiver wire video. Guys, don't forget, head over to RotoBaller.com right now. Check out everything we have there, the main page, premium package, you name it. RotoBaller.com has you covered. Sign up for that premium pass. Use the promotional code ACES. Take advantage of the team's sync tools, lineup optimizers, and all the great content at RotoBaller.com. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel and download the RotoBaller app. It's free. 6 great sports right in the palm of your hand. Premium and regular subscription material, DFS season-long content as well. All right, week 3 almost in the books. 2 more games tonight, but we did have some injuries. Derek Carr with a shoulder, not a season ender, but he'll be out for a few weeks. Gus Edwards a concussion. Mike Williams suffers a knee injury. That looked like the worst of the injuries of the day. It looked like it could be a season ender for him. Deebo Samuel had banged up his ribs on Thursday night, and I'm sure there are other injuries that occurred. We got Joe Burrow and his calf happening later tonight on Monday night. We'll know more about that by the time you're watching this, so just be mindful of that as well. So we'll start at the quarterback position, and the one quarterback that's on the waiver wire that I feel now in even a 1 QB league should be added, I mentioned him last week, is CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. Yet on Yahoo roster percentages, still only 20% rostered. As always, we try to keep the players at less than 50% on the Yahoo platform. CJ Stroud, 20% rostered, leads the surprise victory, the upset victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. He goes for 24.6 fantasy points in a 6-point per touchdown format. 20 of 30, 280, and 2 touchdowns. Rushes for 14 yards as well. He's got 54 fantasy points. In his last 2 games, he's been allowed to throw the ball now over about 120 times in 3 games, an average of about 40 pass attempts per game, and a good matchup next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is my number 1 quarterback ad of the week. Now, the only other quarterback I wanted to mention today is if you're in a 2 QB or super flex format, Jameis Winston might be the best ad you could get right now, especially if you've lost Derek Carr. Winston, yesterday, went 10 of 16 for 101 yards, just over 4 points, didn't throw a touchdown. Plays Tampa in week 4. Tampa defense has played well, but Jameis Winston is walking into a spot where, truthfully, backup quarterback could do well. Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara coming back next week for the New Orleans Saints. So we know there's weapons there in New Orleans. That defense is playing very well, except for that 4th quarter against Green Bay. So Jameis Winston in a 2 QB format, maybe you play in the FFPC Superflex like I do, Jameis Winston would be the ad, as most other quarterbacks would be already rostered in a 2 QB format. Let's talk running backs now, where Devon Achane is by far the number 1 ad of the week. And I know that many of you are going to come at me and say, oh, he's already rostered in my league. Well, that's good. You're in a competitive league and he should be rostered. Coming into the weekend, he was 40% rostered on Yahoo. I have him in plenty of spots. I'm not going to deny that. I was blinded by that 4.34 speed at the combine this past April. We know the game he had on Sunday. If you watch football, you couldn't miss it. 56 fantasy points in a PPR format, 4 total touchdowns. 233 total yards receiving and rushing. Tougher matchup next week at Buffalo. Okay, I mean, between him and Raheem Mostert, it was absurd what they did this past week against the Denver Broncos. Now, that being said, there are people who came up to me with concerns already about Achane. Mostert played great. He didn't get injured. Is Achane still going to see that work? It's a fair question. Jeff Wilson is eventually coming back for the Miami Dolphins. Fair point. All of that is fair. When you draft Achane and his speed, and then he puts up numbers like he put up yesterday, you have to game plan him in some way, shape, or form. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, Achane, the speed on that team is just otherworld level speed. And that's why Miami might have right now the best offense in the NFL, and why Tua is on a pace to be the league MVP, as the Dolphins are legitimate right now, in my eyes, Super Bowl contenders. A-Chain's not going away. He will be involved. You do not put up 233 total yards and 4 touchdowns and then go back to the end of the bench. You saw him getting involved a little bit in week 2. You saw him explode in week 3. He's 40% rostered. Get him on your team if he's somehow available. Second running back I wanted to mention, and I can't believe, talk about a drop-off here, right? You go from A-Chain to Melvin Gordon, 1% rostered, but we got to pay attention to it. With J.K. Dobbins out for the year, Gus Edwards with the concussion, and Justice Hill missing the game because of a toe injury, Mel Gordon was the next man up, and he finished with 7.5 fantasy points in a PPR format. 10 carries for 32 yards, 2 receptions for 32 yards. Nice game considering we didn't expect anything out of Melvin Gordon. Very tough matchup next week for the Baltimore run game against the Cleveland Browns, but desperate times, desperate measures, Mel Gordon at 1% rostered. Now, the wide receiver position. Again, the first wide receiver I'm talking about, I begged you to add last week. Some of you listened, some of you didn't. But Nathaniel Tank Dell of the Houston Texans, only 30% rostered on Yahoo, means he's still out there somewhere. Yet he put up 25.5 fantasy points and looked fantastic. 5 catches, 145 yards on 7 targets, including the big play, 1 touchdown, and a good matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense in week 4. Tank Dell is a must-start right now every week until proven otherwise. He's got 12 receptions on 17 targets, 217 yards, and 2 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He has 45.7 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Tank Dell is an add and a start right now, week 4 of your lineup. Up number 2 at the wide receiver position, Joshua Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. We lost Mike Williams. We've done this before. We did it last year. We added Josh Palmer to some level of success. He's 2% rostered, 14.6 fantasy points yesterday after the Mike Williams injury. 4 catches, 66 yards on 7 targets, and a touchdown. He does have 12 targets in his last 2 weeks, and they go against the Vegas Raiders that allowed Calvin Austin and George Pickens to have nice games on Sunday Night Football. Number 3, staying with the Chargers. Now, I'm not in here, but I'm going to mention the rookie Quentin Johnson. Some people are saying Quentin Johnson, I shouldn't even call him number 3. I'm going to call him, Joshua Palmer, if you miss Palmer and you lose Mike Williams. He's not even number 3. But Quentin Johnson is 32% rostered. People love him because he was the first-round pick. Understand he's been 4th on that depth chart for the Chargers. 5 catches, 26 yards, 8 targets on the season. What could happen very easily is Palmer becomes Williams, Quentin Johnson becomes Palmer. Some people may take the flyer on Quentin Johnson just because Mike Williams is out and the first-round pedigree that Quentin Johnson has. My next wide receiver, though, Josh Downs of the Indianapolis Colts, is a different story. 2% rostered. He's got 24 targets in his last 3 games. 8 targets per game over the last 3. 8 catches, 57 yards, 12 targets in week 3, 13.7 fantasy points for the Colts wide receivers. He's emerging as a viable option alongside Pittman and Pierce against the Rams next week. And finally, and I didn't think I'd be able to mention him, but I will, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers, 46% rostered, so he just makes the cut. Last 2 games, 18 catches, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 targets. He is the Carolina Panthers quarterback. Whether it's Young or Dalton, he's their favorite target. Goes against Minnesota next week. Adam Thielen has just under 52 fantasy points over the last 2 games. And finally, if you need a tight end, take a look in Green Bay at Luke Musgrave, 18% rostered, 10.9 fantasy points. He's got 15 targets in 3 games, 5 targets per game this week, 6 catches, 49 yards, and 8 targets. Goes against Detroit. Detroit does give up points to tight end Luke Musgrave in a desperation tight end ad. Now, to wrap it up, my top 5 ads for week 4 of the fantasy football season. Number 1, Devin A-Chain of the Miami Dolphins. Number 2, Tank Dell, wide receiver, Houston Texans. Number 3, Josh Palmer, wide receiver, Los Angeles Chargers. Number 4, Josh Downs, wide receiver, Indianapolis Colts. and number 5 is quarterback C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. All right, everybody, don't forget, like I said, head over to RotoBaller.com. Check it out right now. Sign up for that premium package using the promo code ACES. Give me a follow on Twitter at @AnianoFantasy. And like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. We'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.